Luis Rubiales, the president of the Spanish Football Federation, has been under fire for his behavior during the celebration of the Women's World Cup, where he kissed Jenni Hermoso on the lips. We're going to take a look at the body language of both of them, especially his gesture of holding her tightly by her head, and also take a look at his attitude denying he's going to resign and the clues in his recorded apology. For starters, the main circumstances surrounding this behavior are well known, but as in every body language analysis, we need to establish them because what is going on at any given time around the people we are going to analyze is going to condition their behavior in more than one way. In this case, it was an outstanding event for everyone in Spain. The women's team had won the World Cup and they were celebrating with Queen Letizia, her daughter, and Rubiales. But there's one factor that we need to take into account. In situations like this, it's understandable that after so much tension or a World Cup final match and having won the trophy, everyone is going to have a rush of dopamine and be exhilarated about this, which will in turn transform their behavior in the sense of being less in control and more spontaneous. In other words, they're going to act more uninhibited than usual. Now, it's not only the circumstances that surround people's behavior. We also need to take into account their culture, their customs, and how do they usually behave. But before we think of body language baseline, it's important to remember Spanish culture about this kind of manifestations. Saving distances with our analysis or what happened here, if you have been to Spain, you might notice that people talk really close to one another, and there's a lot of physical touch in the sense of touching your arm or your back while talking, and it's something seen as normal. Now, I'm not saying that Spanish culture justifies Rubiales' behavior. I just thought it was important to highlight that physical touch and proximity in Spain culture is much closer and warmer than other parts of Europe, and for that matter, the world. But let's take a closer look at their body language to see what was really off about this. Now, I'm going to break my rule of going from the general to the specific, and I'm going to jump to the kiss directly. And the big question that everyone is asking is whether this kiss was consensual or not. And I'm sure that this is a point that will generate a discussion in the comments. Because amateur lip readers on the internet are claiming that he asked for permission, but the evidence is contradicting at best. I'm going to talk about the video of the team in the locker room afterwards, but right now we should focus on this gesture. Regardless of asking permission about the kiss, grabbing someone's head is a very dominant gesture. And this is regardless of the sex of those involved. It's something that limits their movement and it's something that can take you by surprise. But the meaning of this gesture goes well beyond that. Let's say, for example, that Hermoso actually said, pues vale, or go ahead with the kiss. Again, I'm not saying that this happened, but there are many people claiming those were her words. In all cases, she would have said that when Rubiales was holding her head with both hands. And this is a very controlling and dominant gesture. And he's asking the so-called permission, expecting the answer in half a second while holding her head like this and not allowing her to look away. You don't need to be a body language expert to realize it was a lot of pressure on her. And that's why it was so important to mention the circumstances, the dopamine rush, the celebration, and everything surrounding this. People tend to act by impulse, get carried away by the moment. Again, I'm not judging anyone's behavior. Getting carried away is something that happens in this kind of circumstances. But some recollections contradict what everybody is saying about what happened, especially one live stream video that was shared by the team in the locker room afterwards. And the problem that we have here is that Hermoso is heard off camera saying, pues vale, or go ahead, but we cannot confirm who asked her the question or if it was her who actually said those words, because all these sounds happen off camera. I am not familiar with the players' voices, but if you can give me insights, if you think that Jenni Hermoso was the one who answered that, it would be great. It's also interesting that she was eating right at that exact moment, so that makes me doubt She was the one who pronounced those words. At the same time, when Rubiales told them about the trip to Ibiza, everyone began joking about the Rubiales and Jenni wedding. So there's that. This is why I told you that this case was more complex than we can say at first sight. What's even more concerning about this is that Rubiales is kind of their boss here. So we're talking that he's acting from a position of power. And that is one of the factors that we must take into account that doesn't have to do with body language itself, but conditions how body language and behavior has to be assessed. Because regardless if Spanish men are touchy or display some these gestures, and it's okay, the position of power is what makes this troublesome. Regarding the proximity and the gestures with the rest of the team, I think he pretty much treated everyone the same way. And when you look at comments about his behavior, you see that most complaints are from non-Spanish speaking people. That should also be taken into account. Now, if you ask me what is my opinion about the gesture itself with all the players, I would say that regardless of the heat of the moment, and regardless of his position of power, this is an interaction that involves intimate space. You're hugging, kissing on the neck, tapping them, so there has to be a lot of trust in here to act like that. But the other side of the coin, it would be hard to believe that there would be the same trust with every single one of the players of the team. It never works that way. Even in professional relationships, some of the members of a group are going to build more affinity than others, especially if we are talking about the boss in this case. So I doubt that every single player was okay with his attitude. But at the same time, if he hadn't kissed Hermoso, none of this would have gone this far. And that must be the reason why Rubiales made that speech with a very strong stance, saying that over and over again that he was not going to resign. And he shouted that 5 times, making a special emphasis every time. Now, this shows that he was really upset by what was going on, about the pressure, about how the public was pressuring him into resigning. Maybe saying it once and in control would have been enough. Repeating it many times with that kind of body language shows that he's not in total control of his emotions. So you could say that, oh, he's just a very passionate guy, he cares about the sport and his job, of course, and that reinforces my point about behavior. If you care about the sport and your job, you'll understand your responsibility, and regardless if the team won the World Cup, you make sure to act as a gentleman, which I think was not the case here. And it has to be said about this apology video. He's just not into giving an apology. He's shifting his eyes all over the place, doing shoulder shrugs a couple times like it was no big deal. And just to be clear, that's not for him to judge, because obviously if he's being forced into giving an apology, then he must understand that many people believe this is a big deal, but he still doesn't seem to care. There are 2 things about this, and it's that he said the words, whatever happened already happened, and that dismissal of events doesn't sit well. You either apologize and acknowledge you did something wrong, but you don't try to brush it off, because that makes your apology completely artificial. And those smug facial gestures that he shows right after saying that don't help either. This is one of those cases in which an apology does more harm than good for the person. So this case was not black and white. We got different recollections, troubling camera angles, but at the same time, some controlling gestures that pressure in the moment that can be dismissed. It doesn't matter the culture. This kind of things are always bound to happen, and the best way to act is to try to prevent them in the first place. And I'm talking in this case about Rubiales. Getting carried away in the moment is a bit dangerous if you know that you're on the world stage. Don't forget to download my free 100 body language tips in the description of this video, and just hit the like and subscribe buttons if you don't want to miss any of my body language analysis. Much love and bliss.